I read you Greenberg's 50?
I don't think so.
So, you know who Greenberg is, right?
Clement Greenberg.
No, the watercolorist, Max's best friend.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, Greenberg is the guy who gave me my entrance exam at art and design.
Right.
And so like I walked into art and design, I was 15, and I was so insecure about my portfolio, and like I had to do a drawing test and an interview, and Greenberg did the interview, and I was wearing a Rolling Stones shirt, and he said, what's your favorite form of art? And I said, abstract art, because I didn't know what else to say. Like I was like talking through my ass.
That sounded like the right answer.
It sounded like the right answer to the wrong guy, by the way. He was a realist, you know.
Immediately suspect.
And so he's like, okay, tell me what abstract art is. And I was like, duh. And I'm like, damn, I blew this, right? And so he like grabs my shirt and like pulls it and he says, now make a square around this area of the shirt, and you see all these shapes, that's abstract art. And I was like, okay, great.
Nod and smile.
I nod and smile, right? And you know, a lot was riding on this this interview, because if I didn't make it to art and design, I was going to go to my zoned high school. I don't know if you have zoned high schools where you come from. Basically, it's your town high school, right?
Yeah.
There's just one, right?
Yeah, one public school.
One public school, right? Is it 1st to 12th grade? Was it 1st to 12th grade?
Where I grew up, it was broken out. You had
grammar school,
1st through 3rd, 4th through 6th, and then high school.
Oh, and then high school, right?
Or no, sorry.
Middle school, no?
There were 4 schools then. They've now consolidated, but it was broken out. High school was just 9 through 12.
Did you have your own locker?
I did have a locker.
Did you have carpeting in your school?
Carpeting?
Yeah, was it carpet?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You know, so I'll get back to the story with Greenberg, but I remember getting in trouble with in the 7th grade. I got busted with a joint in the 7th grade, and like they called my mom to come get me, and she was pissed, and we had it out, and I went to live with my brother, and I got to actually go to school in a proper school. Like it had carpeting, I had a locker, it had a gym, it had a music room. It was amazing. It was amazing. So, but my zoned high school, back to Greenberg, was Julia Richmond, and Julia Richmond was zoned for Spanish Harlem and Harlem, and it was, for a white kid, it was like going to Rikers Island. There was probably 4 white kids in that school, and each of them were getting beat up multiple times a day. And I did not want to go there. And so like I left feeling completely defeated. And then I got a letter that I got accepted, you know? And interestingly enough, right, I tell Max Ginsberg was his best friend. They were best friends. And they did this, they used to do this morning class at Art and Design where all of these guys came out of. Steve Assell came out of there, and a couple of very important painters came out of there. And I was telling Max that guy saved my life. And he said, you're not the only one. He knew kids. He had this like quality of picking out kids who were in trouble, like, and he knew that art could do something for them. So, I don't know how we got on Greenberg, right? Oh, Greenberg's 50. So he has 50 tenets for an artist. Like, don't eat while you're, like, don't take lunch when you're painting. Like, you go to sleep. Drink only water. Like, paint every day. Like, drink only water when you're painting. Like, paint every day. There's some really good ones. So I was thinking, trying to do some like metaphysical ones that like paralleled them a bit. And so we came up with a couple.
Okay.
So you see anything you like?
I mean, right at the top of the list here, you can't rush art, but it will insist on being revealed.
Okay.
I think it's
so.
interesting.
Welcome to the Gentle Art Podcast with Gene Dunn. Today we're with the amazing landscape artist Casey Inch. Welcome.
Thank you.
He's so humble. Like he has to look down at that word. For those of you who don't know, Casey's been one of the most important teachers in my life. I've spent it's now 8 years painting with Casey. We've been through COVID together. We've had work in museums, we've had gallery shows. We've done a lot of great things. And he's been the person that I think that has brought the art out of me the most in my life. And I'm just so happy to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So our idea is to start with a quote that is by me, worked on with my mentor, and we'll just go from there. So the quote is, "You cannot rush art, but art will insist on being revealed." So what's your thought?
I mean, I immediately think of that in terms of just the process of making a painting. I believe in taking my time. I don't think there's any reason to rush a painting. And I find that there's always a process of discovery in the making. And that regardless of whether you set out with a reference or something you're looking at in life, or some kind of preconceived idea of what it's going to be, that discovery and that revealing happens in pushing the paint around. For me, like, I build a lot of layers in my work,
right?
And there's a literal and a figurative revealing happening in that process, right? Sometimes pushing a layer of paint around and a layer beneath comes through in a way, and the colors interact in a way that just clicks and does something that I never could have anticipated or intended. But so much of it, I think, is just paying attention.
Right.
And that sounds like the obvious. It's like, of course you're paying attention to what you're doing, but you can so easily gain something and lose something in a second, in one swipe of the brush. So
do you think, like, as cliche as it sounds, do you think that Picasso was right when he said, inspiration is real, it just finds you working? Is that like what you think? That's what he means? Like you're working and then it, like, something just like reveals itself. Yeah.
I mean, if I come up with an idea for a painting or concept for a picture, it's not the excitement is rarely in that moment. The excitement is in the execution. And in those again, these processes of discovery and surprise. And
I feel like those moments are really intoxicating. I have this sense when I'm looking at oil paint or watercolor will do that for me too. Like I feel a little bit drunk about it, and I can't actually describe some of my emotions as it pertains to what I'm looking at, but it can be an overwhelming feeling, overwhelming joy. Like, yeah. Well, like I heard you say, like, you feel as though the painting will, like, it takes its time. And I have two questions for you. One is that I know that when we paint, the initial, you keep saying to me, like, the initial hit, it has to be vigorous, right? Like there needs to be something there. And my sense is that, like, it needs to be expressed in a kind of immediate moment. But then it seems paradoxical that it takes time too. Like, what do you think? Like,
I mean, I think it's so different from painter to painter and painting to painting. And it's, for example, like, I have works that end up being very refined in terms of, detail and surface and all these things, but that the openness and the possibility of a blank canvas and the energy that I like to bring to that.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most exciting moments of the painting because you have complete freedom. I mean, I think you have freedom throughout the whole process, but the excitement of those first marks on the canvas when you go from nothing to having this information in front of you and something that you can then react to and speaks back to you.
In the martial arts, right, there's a stance that's called musobidachi, or informal attention stance, and your feet are such and your body is such that you have both balance and mobility. And I've heard a lot of instructors, Japanese instructors, call it an infinite stance. And like it's a starting point. It's a starting point and an end point, and it represents infinity. And I'm just wondering to myself if like that moment, that initial moment, like where you're saying there's so much possibility, is it infinite to you? Does it seem infinite?
I don't know. What does that mean to you in terms of like infinite?
Well, I mean, like you have this plan, right? And you have this blank canvas that is like calling for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way I see it, right? It's calling for some information. And then you put down this information, whatever the initial hit, those are your words to me all the time, right?
Yeah.
The initial hit. And then it seems like it's going to take its own course. So does that, as the painter, are you open like just completely open, or do you kind of reel it back into to your plan, or is it both?
That's interesting. And I've had moments where so to answer the question more directly, like, yes, if I'm inventing a painting, right? A landscape, a space, right? A building, a world, so to speak. Like, I will begin just with gesture.
Yeah.
I'm not even, because I don't have, all right, I'm going for this kind of feeling, or I want it to be an expansive vista, or I want it to be something more frontal, or I want, I'll have a general idea of something to kind of guide me. But sometimes I'm coming from nothing.
Right.
And it's just about, that first stage of toning the canvas, right? Of laying down a thin wash of color, of activating the surface, of just being completely loose and gestural. And the energy, I think, in those marks is always surprising, right? And that
is it informing?
Yes,
it's informing.
Yes,
correct?
Because then every subsequent decision that I make will be informed by that first hit, right? And it does start to take shape. I'm in those cases. I think about letting the forms present themselves, right? I paint landscapes, so I will see a landscape in a canvas covered in gestural marks. But that unexpected quality of, I don't know, like two brushstrokes intersecting in a way, or two values playing off of each other in an interesting way, becomes a space. And I can then start to carve into that. And then, once some of those initial forms start to come through, the other pieces start falling into place.
So I'm sitting here thinking, like, I've never actually thought about this, but is the canvas, in and of itself, a second artist? Is it informing us as we go along, right? Like, there's some interplay it seems indescribable.
It's a conversation.
It is a conversation.
It becomes a conversation.
Isn't
and
it?
When I said earlier, like paying attention.
Yeah.
Is, paying attention to what the, not in a mystical woo way, but what the painting is saying to you, what it's giving you back. And, is it working? Does it click? What do you have to do? Sometimes in service of like one moment in painting, because that's the interest, that becomes the spark.
I'm giggling because I've been in that position and I think I'm paying attention and I hit it with something. I hit the painting with a mark that is like, what the hell was I doing, man? Like, I just screwed this whole thing up, man. Like, it just falls apart. And then there are other times where, like you said, like it comes alive. It's like, oh, there it is. That's it. That's it.
I was listening to one of these podcasts you did with Don, your friend Donna.
Yeah.
From the magazine.
Yeah, sure.
Portray magazine.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Picasso, and there was I don't know if it was a quote or something that, or who said it, but it was about this idea of like destruction.
Yeah.
Right. That there has to be
a destruction.
A destruction.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think when you have a moment like that where you're like, oh man, I put that mark down and it just doesn't work, you're then forced to reckon with that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll use that as an intentional tactic sometimes. If I'm stuck,
yeah,
I will just walk, or frustrated, or I don't know how to get in. I'll just walk up to the canvas and just put some errant mark on there, a wrong mark, you know, or something that seems counterintuitive or that has no intention behind it. And then I have to work that out. And in the working it out, and this all ties into this, you know, finding inspiration in the process, or inspiration finds you working, however we phrased it.
Right.
I think it's a part of that. And you know, I think I've said this before, like you can't think your way out of a problem, out of a painting problem. You ultimately, I think you have to paint your way out.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. It reminds me of like being in a maze. Like, sometimes it seems like the maze from The Shining. It's so daunting sometimes. But yeah, you got to paint your way out of that darn thing. So I think I've heard some interviews with some oil painters that are saying that like you shouldn't spend a lot of time painting. Like it should be just immediate. And, you know, spend an hour, paint broadly, boldly. Now I know what I was going to say to you. Like paint courageously. And I think like your problem solving of just putting an unintentional mark that you've got to contend with is courageous. It takes courage, right? Like, and I think kind of being an artist or living an artful life is a very courageous act.
Yeah, I think there's a certain element of courage, maybe. I haven't thought about it particularly in that way, but I do think there's a trust in the process. I think that only comes through putting in the work and seeing that you will find your way out.
Very early on, you were hammering into me ever so gently, right? Like that's not your style, but like it was a regular kind of mantra, like nothing's precious. Nothing's precious. And then when you're painting, especially when you're just beginning, it all seems so precious. So it takes, like, for me, it took so much courage to just go, okay, I got to paint that out, or I got to paint over that, or I got to figure this out.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I love that about oil paint as a medium, because that wrong mark or that incorrect color, I can chase after that on the canvas. That paint stays wet. So if I don't, you know, I need to find my way back into the painting, I can put a mark down of an incorrect color and then mash something else into that,
right,
and just chase it until I find what I'm looking for. And sometimes, I don't know, there's that vigorous start, right, that we're talking about, but sometimes there's no one way. I don't think, you know, you're talking about, you've listened to interviews with
right.
This is the way. I don't think there's one way. And just speaking from my own experience, like sometimes it's slow getting back in, not in the beginning usually.
Like as you're coming into focus,
coming back in, or trying to, you know, paint my way through something. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's you know, when we've talked about like Cezanne and how he would sit and look and look and look, and then like walk up to the canvas and just place a mark down and then sit back and look, right? Sometimes it's just you creep in
Uh-huh.
and it starts to open up.
Uh-huh.
And I'm with almost without fail, like I'll be like, "Oh, I'm not in the mood to paint today," or
Yeah.
something has distracted me, or I don't know what I'm doing. 99% of the time, but once I find my way in, whether that's through something more impulsive and gestural or through that creeping, uh, it just starts to roll,
Mhm.
and it'll take me where I need to go.
Now you're a professional artist, right? You're a full-time professional artist, right?
Mhm.
Like, are you painting every day?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And so I just want to talk about this because I come back to this courage that I feel it takes to live an artful life, to live the life of an artist. And you recently kind of came out of your corporate job and you'd made the decision that you were gonna to like be a full-time artist. And like I'm fascinated by that. Why what what had you make that decision? What was that like? Did you feel like you were just missing something? What is it? What was it?
Yeah. I mean, I was in this, not corporate, but an administrative role
I've
at an
never
art
had.
school.
I've only had one. Like the last job I had, I was 17 years old. I was just turned 18. I got fired, and that was the last. So all of it's corporate
Done.
America to me.
Yeah. But I was
sorry, buddy.
I was in an office,
Right.
9 to 5
You had to
job,
go. You got to.
HR department, all
Yeah.
that
Right.
stuff. And I did it for 10 years. I think, coming out of graduate school, I did an MFA. And that experience of those 2 years, like, there's the connections you have with professors, with your peers, all of that. But that experience of for those 2 years, my sole responsibility was to be in the studio and make paintings,
Right.
or make my work, whatever
Yeah.
that was gonna be.
Right.
And I found in the years after that, I was like, I was chasing that. But, I graduated and it was a recession,
Right.
and, hustling and doing the juggling act of teaching classes at night and working as a barista and
Right.
doing all these things and scraping by. And then there's this opportunity came around to take a big kid job, right?
Right.
With like the security that comes with that.
Right.
And it's at some point in grad school, one of my like biggest mentors said something to me and towards the end, and he was like, you have to make a decision to support your work or rely on your work to support you.
Uh-huh.
And I think in the past 10, 15 years, I had been kind of grappling with that. What is that balance? How do I find that? Selling paintings is not easy. And
You don't say, buddy.
it still doesn't pay all the bills.
Right. Yet.
So yeah, I think the biggest impetus for quitting the job and saying I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
it was about prioritizing my time and how realizing how valuable it was for me to be able to kind of tip the scales, right? I want
Yeah.
the majority of my time to be spent doing what I feel I'm meant to do and what I really truly want to do. And that just wasn't possible working a job like that.
Uh-huh.
Because I was going to that job
Right.
and then I
Right.
was
Right.
hustling
Right.
and teaching nights and doing so. It was a leap.
Buddy, I have so much respect for it. I really do. I think it's an amazing leap of faith, and it's inspiring, and it's important. And I just want to be mindful. Like I think that I am of the mind that everybody walking the planet Earth has an art. Like there's an art inside of them. That may be poetry, that may be music, that may be dog training, that may be serving tea. if you're in Japan, like, but each person has an art. And I do think, like, I think there are people that grapple with, oh, I need to be doing what I'm meant to do as a living. And then there are people that grapple with, I'm not even expressing a little bit of my art, and I need to just start doing that. And I don't want to, they both can exist, you know, like, and I think they're both very important. And I just know, like, you've been a great teacher for me. And I think I've watched you teach very beginner students. And I just, if you were on that side of the fence, right? If you were a corporate person, or a mom that is taking care of 2 kids, or a dad, or however you want to frame it, and you have a desire to do art and it's just not present, how would you go about it? Like, what would you tell that person?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's necessary. It's not the amount of time. You know, I'm talking about, like, I want to be spending most of my time
8 hours a day
in the studio, whatever it is.
Right.
I want that to be the number one priority. But you can make it work. You know, I have friends who hustle harder than, you know, make me feel lazy.
Right.
You know, they're a parent and they have a job and they're doing this and they're doing that, and then they're getting in the studio. And it's like, even if you only have a few hours a day,
Right.
if you're consistent about it, if you have that discipline to get in there,
Right.
you can make it happen. You know, I've listened to interviews with lots of parents, you know, successful artists who are also parents, and how many people told them coming up that, oh, don't you have kids and that's it. Like,
It's over.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But
don't have kids, or don't be an artist.
Maybe both. Can you do anything else? But they work it out. You find a way. I think it's you know, coming back to what you were saying, like, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if in the way you approach making your coffee in the morning or whatever, these little rituals, because I find that painting is full of little rituals.
Yep.
You know, the laying out of your palette.
Yep. The mise en place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I know that as I move more into this endeavor, and as I know it in the martial arts, like, I'm a very ritualistic person. It's all little rituals. My day is made up of hundreds of different little rituals. And I maybe it's obsessive or compulsive, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels successful. You know, it feels very successful.
Yeah.
I think I'm remembering back to one of our first lessons, and you had said to me, try to draw 10 minutes a day. Try to draw 10 minutes a day. And that is the thing. Like, I did that, and that turned into 30 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned into an hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's turned into multiple hours a day.
Yeah.
And then there's big progress.
Yeah. I mean, and how often even if you set out, oh, I'm going to do 10 minutes, that you get so caught up in that process, again, that's where it takes you.
Yeah.
It's the starting. It's the beginning. It's getting that mark down, getting something to speak back to you. And then you just run with it. Hours go by. You know, I was painting the other day. It's, you know, we're here in New York. It's been raining for like a week. We had like the great deluge, you know, park slopes underwater. So I was like, I'm not leaving the house.
Yeah.
And I just painted all day. I forgot to eat.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I look up, it's dark out. Just hours roll by.
Amazing.
And that's so valuable.
Thank you for listening to the Gentle Art Podcast. Please share, rate, and review. And if you have any questions or you'd like to reach out, please contact us at the GentleArtPodcast@gmail.com, or contact us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or thegentleartpodcast.com.